Hello and welcome to today's Battle Mech review. Today we're going to be looking at a mech that is completely outside the norm with the Jupiter. The reason I'm saying this here is because, well, this is a Clan Jade Falcon machine, and it is not named after a bird, so that's already a thing there. And it is also not a machine that you would expect from Clan Jade Falcon. It doesn't have a partial wing. It is not super mobile. It is not particularly agile, except for its hands, which are remarkably good at picking up and moving things, but there's a reason for that. So it's a mech that is in its particular category of very big and scary assault mech, which is a little bit odd if you think about it, at least for the Clan Jade Falcon. You wouldn't be expecting one of these machines to show up most of the time, but when they do, generally the Jupiter makes a pretty big mark here. They are big, scary machines and able to do things that you wouldn't expect them to be able to do, at least not on the tech base they are built on. So let's get into it. For all intents and purposes, the Jupiter started its life as construction equipment. Your original JPT-11I, the 11I as it was sometimes called actually, was an uncommon sight throughout the Cold region of the Inner Sphere during most of the Star League and the Succession War era. It was a massive 100-ton industrial mech that was meant to carry and install all sorts of construction equipment, help bulldozers up hills, install and carry rebar, drop off cement mixers in different places. It was literally your pack rat kind of a machine that you could literally have the industrial guys say, well, grab something, bring it there, drop it off, go grab more stuff, bring it here, bring a whole bunch of construction equipment with you, drop it here, materials, drop it there. Something very simple that you could easily do with a truck, but not in every particular regions and situations. And the Jupiter was a little bit more agile, even at 100 tons, than many large-scale industrial vehicles. Industrial mechs have been around for a little bit longer than battle mechs, and many of them were originally being used in dangerous and special environments in order to protect more people or just make things a little bit easier. A truck or a drill is pretty good here, and even one of those massive chainsaw truck is pretty good overall, but a logging mech, as an example, which was one of the first type of industrial mech, is pretty darn great because you can cut the tree at every height you want, you can adjust things, you can use it to just trim the tops of the trees in some locations, which is pretty darn nice. The first mechs that were used on a battlefield were actually recovery machines that were used to pull out tanks from ditches, holes, and other assorted tank traps and nasties, or grab one of those poor little other tanks and, well, put it back up and try to patch up the skirt on them so they can go back to work. Between the introduction of Mechwarrior and the industrial mech and the final battle mech result, there was about 100 years of trial and errors, and you already had seen a few of them being armed with various things, because that's just how people are. We like having big guns on just about everything. Throughout the Inner Sphere nowadays, there are probably hundreds of models of industrial mechs, and some of them are more popular than others. You might not know all of them either. Some of them are built on one particular planet for one particular reason, and they are never exported anywhere else, or some of them are built, somewhere and nobody really uses them, and then someone realizes that, hey, this particular thing here that you're using for logging is actually really, really good. I'm going to buy, 150 of them, and things get really weird. During the Succession War, they were not as common as you would want. I mean, a lot of the factories that were building industrial mechs were reconverted into battle mech production facilities just because, well, they were able to build Mechwarrior, and you needed Mechwarrior to build mechs, and, things got really nasty here. Agromechs have been getting a lot of popularity lately, at least, and you have a lot of mods floating around, basically technical machines that were used around the Republic of the Sphere in that particular reason here as basic weaponized industrial mechs to defend from, well, whatever was going to happen. right after the collapse of the HPG network, those got very, very popular for a short period of time as people rearmed. General militias and the smaller groups like that still use quite a few of those mods, and they're still in production in some cases. Another popular aggro mech I would say is the Cattle Master, which is the basis of the mech that we are building here in fairly large amount, with the Bullfighter, which is, well, roughly put the periphery version of the urban mech, if you want to think of it that way. It's a full-on battle mech and not an actual industrial mech. It is decently armed, it is not very fast, it is not very agile, but you know, we've had a very good success with it fighting other bug mechs or urban mechs, so we're very proud of building them and selling them to whoever wants them. As a military gal and gal, you will probably be looking at quite a few different industrial mechs as well over the years, and there's quite a few that are always around the base. Things like the Power Man, well, that's your transport and utility industrial mech, which will bring the various parts you need to repair your machine. You will see them lugging around an LRM or carrying a large laser, dropping it off next to your mech while a bunch of techs start stripping the part around and pulling it back up. You have the same thing with the Loader King, which is pretty much the standard loader mech just about everywhere, and it brings tons of ammo to the brave warfighters around the inner sphere. I mean, the Loader King itself is a base model, and it is proprietary to a particular company, but I mean, there's copies of the Loader King that are just about everywhere in different ways. This one was also turned into a military unit over the years, into the very popular Roughneck, not one of the machines that you will have seen in massive amounts, but if you're a merc, you will probably have seen one or two Roughneck in your life, because those things are, well, just cheap enough and efficient enough that people keep buying them. A Buster is another all-purpose utility industrial mech, very much used as the same way as the Power Man and their Loader King, bringing ammo and parts to your mech, while the Uni/Heavy Lifter, depending on who builds it, is your cross-country transport industrial mech that will carry all the parts those other, well, 3 or 4 mechs will start bringing to your machine. Unis are incredibly popular and incredibly stable as a platform, and you will actually have people replacing an entire group of trucks with unis if available, just because they're able to go through, well, all sorts of terrain, which is far more useful for some companies on some of the more backwater worlds of the inner sphere. Down the line here now we have the Jupiter, which comes from this particular line of thinking here from CGF Factory Zone 4. The Falcons had a bit more foresight than some of the other clan by the end of the FedCom Civil War and at the start of the Jihad, and they already had started moving all sorts of things back to the inner sphere in order to get some production going. They were already noticing that the other clans in the homeworld were starting to get a little bit uppity. Issues got even worse when the man with a nose for taint, Brett Andrews, decided that he wanted to kick out everybody from clan space because they were not pure enough for himself. And the Falcons knew this whole thing would end bad with the War of Reaving. Basing it off an industrial mech, the Jupiter was going to be simple, easy to build, easy to maintain as a standard battle mech, and it was meant to support the Turkina, which was the Falcon's primary assault mech, which is actually another remarkably simple machine, all things considered. The only thing I don't like is these hard-mounted jump jets on it. In terms of performance, this new assault didn't look like much at first, but pilots quickly learned to appreciate it both in and out of Clan Jade Falcon, who actually were willing to trade some of them to other powers, including even some inner sphere powers, against, well, some pretty decent concessions. Production of it is not a priority to compare to some of the more modern Totham mech out there. But there's still a steady stream of new Jupiters being released and put into production to this day. The Jade Falcons did not actually spare much on the development of the Jupiter, and they did go with some pretty darn good equipment, starting with a Goshawk E-Series Raptor XT combo in the Ed 40 comms and targeting system, giving it a superior long-range targeting capability. The body is made of standard alloy covered with 19.5 tons of standard plate, which is pretty much as you can stick on a big 100-tonner before going with ardent plates, meaning that this is about the most basic kind of machine out there in terms of maintenance, at least. You just need the very basic equipment in order to fix the body, the myomer, the armor. So if it gets messed up, well, you still have to be able to fix it with whatever you find around the base. The engine is also rather bog standard, at least for the clan side of thing, and it's a Gorvok 300XL, which is basically a Vlar 300XL. Let's not kid ourselves there. And it gives you a top speed of 54 kilometers per hour, which is seen as sufficient for most fire support mechs and mechs in the 100-ton categories. All of that is quite nice and is cooled down by 17 double heat sinks. It does sound like a lot at first, but you're going to have a whole lot of guns on that thing as well, so it is going to run hot. Is there anything that you could do to tweak things here? I actually don't think so. If you started replacing things with ferrofibrous or with endo steel, you wouldn't have any room in the insides to put anything else. And, well, you could stick ardent plates on it and reduce the amount of weapons, I guess, you put on, but it would start being a little bit too slow to be useful. There might be a few other tweaks you could do. Maybe stick a supercharger on there by moving things around, but it's still quite sufficient. With all of its weapon being clan graded, well, you are actually going to be able to brawl with your standard Jupiter, but it is really meant to engage at least medium to long range. Each arm packs a pair of Ultra 5 class autocannon with 4 tons of reloads, and with recent improvement on Ultra autocannons, this thing might actually be a little bit more efficient than you think. I mean, it is bad news for a lot of people, and it kind of mimics one of my other favorite 100-tonner, the Carapace version of the King Crab. Each side torso mounts both an ERPPC and a 15 rack of LRM with a ton of reload each, which is okay, which means you're going to be able to take things out at a long range remarkably easily, but in the end, if you start shooting everything, you will run quite hot, even with those 17 double heat sinks. You can easily control things and maybe not shoot both of those ERPPCs, but those things are very good at capping and doing a whole lot of damage. And while the Ultra AC5s, well, they're just going to pepper things down. It's really the LRMs that are the bad little thing on there, and it's mainly going to be used in indirect fire situations. The Mark II Jupiter came out in 3070, and it was more capable of following its friend the Turkino around by adding a full set of jump jets, giving you a jump range of 90 meters. The weapon loadout is also tweaked, with the RPPCs still being front and center, well, literally in the case of the Jupiter, with the LRM 15 racks on the shoulders now having Artemis 4 guidance, giving you a little bit more accuracy on them, at least clustering accuracy. The big change, however, is the replacement of the 5 class autocannon with a single Ultra 10 class on each side, which basically means you have the same kind of firepower, but with a little bit less range and maybe a little bit better heat efficiency. So it is a nice investment, and I think this is the superior version. Between the regular and the Mark II, I would generally go with a Mark II, at least in my personal opinion. The Jupiter Mark III came out in 3075 and was built with cutting-edge technology in order to make it a very effective anti-air unit. I mean, you can easily use it as a ground combat unit as well because, well, all of those weapons are going to hurt a whole lot. But, you know, it is a little bit more tweaked here towards taking out things that are flying overhead. The ERPPCs are swapped out with a pair of Hyper Assault Gauss 30 with 6 tons of reloads, which still means you only have 12 volleys for them. But, I mean, 12 volleys of those very big guns should mean that anything that's flying overhead is going to be taken out. And if there's a regular mech that decided to just pop in front of you, those two things will probably smack them down as well. The arms also feature Ultra 10 class autocannons from the Mark II, giving you an okay amount of firepower in other situations, while you also have a pair of ER medium lasers in the center torso in case you run out of ammo and to just do a little bit of a plinking. You only really need 12 double heat sinks on this particular model, and it is quite efficient at what it is meant to do. In 3093, you added the new Mark IV that came out, which replaced the 300XL engine with a fairly massive 400XL, giving you a top speed of 64 kilometers per hour in a straight line. It's really the walking speed or the cruising speed on that thing that is a big improvement because, well, it's a little bit faster than the original and will allow you to get into better positions overall. This forces the weaponry on the thing, though, to be pared down quite a bit here because, well, the engine is much bigger, with each arm now packing a 4-tube of Streak SRM rather than big guns. It is better against tanks, which is sometimes pretty nice, though. The torsos remain more or less the same with a pair of ERPPCs and Artemis-guided 15 racks of LRM, so you're still pretty good at long range anyways, and you're still able to decapitate things fairly well. You also have 21 double heat sinks to keep this thing pretty much completely cold, however, which is another pretty nice improvement. I haven't played around with this one as much as the others, I will be honest here. It is fairly recent, at least in my neck of the wood, and the Jade Falcons have been less willing to trade weapons, at least recently. But this particular design, if you start facing it, you will probably regret it just being that much faster than the original, and it might surprise a few commanders. Are there some common modifications for the Jupiter? Well, yes, there are quite a few actually, and the most basic one is to replace the paired ERPPCs with a pair of similar sized and similar weight large pulse lasers. You will lose on range by actually a fair margin here, and raw destructive power. Large pulse lasers are not as powerful as ERPPC in a straight shot, but you will gain heavily on accuracy and on heat efficiency, which would actually make the Jupiter a little bit better. It really depends on what the pilots want. I've even seen some with an ERPPC and a large pulse laser, or that might have just been, one that has been repaired on the field. But the twin large pulse lasers Jupiter are actually very useful in more, let's say, mobile structures. You will see a number of Mark IIs as well, with the arm assemblies completely removed, and an LB-10X replacing the Ultra 10s. This means that this is a completely anti-air machine at that point, with a pair of AG-30s and LB-10X. You lose on firepower, but anything that's flying above at this point will simply just fall down because of the amount of shrapnel you're going to throw up in the air. Another unusual swap is actually the replacement of the 15 racks of LRM with a pair of 6-tube of SRMs, which is sometimes used in order to reconfigure the thing to fight against tanks, which are never really seen as a huge threat, at least for a big assault mech. But, I mean, if there's a lot of that particular standard armor floating around, this would actually make the Jupiter a little bit, a pretty huge threat to them. Some people turn around and ask me about the original, and we have a few of the Jupiter GP111I, or however you want to call them, around here, that share the chassis and look of your modern Jupiter and the very nice little actuators in the arms here to pick stuff up, but really that is about it. The engine is a 200 rated ICE running on diesel fuel, normally, making it pretty slow, but that is mostly expected on industrial mechs out there, and it also has tracks on its legs in order to be able to plow through various terrain when required. It has 16 tons of an heavy industrial armor, which makes it quite tough for a mech in its particular category, but that's because it was also meant to, take a beating from things falling on it or hitting a wall or something like that, and requiring very little maintenance. The most common model of them has a pair of lift hoists in each of the arms, while massive cargo bays make up each of the side torsos. Basically, where those big ERPPCs are sticking out, well, those are basically handles that open up so you can take out whatever is inside the side torsos. It's a very basic little industrial mech, but it works quite well. I would say that the Jupiter is a menace. While it's not the most common machine out there, with a simple and tough build, it just keeps going and can be repaired from almost any version of scrap you're able to find. The really hard bit to find in it is its engine, and even that is not that hard because, like I said, a regular VLAR 300 will fit in its body if you finagle things just a little bit. While there's a variety of options for it, most of them will fit in that fire support role primarily, generally direct fire, support, which is a little bit different here. But it's a thing a lot of people really like to do with assault mechs to begin with, and unlike the Stalker and the Viking, this one has arms. It might sound silly, but being able to prop yourself back up once you fall is pretty darn useful, and the ability to clobber an annoying light mech that gets a little bit too close is generally rather fantastic, especially with a mech this size. I do think the Jupiter is a thing you should keep an eye out for, because it is a thing that will fill out your formations really well. So I thank you very much for listening for me for so long. I hope you guys have a nice rest of your day, and I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.